I'm Corey Johnson, in for Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Bitcoin's meteoric surge risks coming to a painful end. Chinese policymakers moved to restrict trading amid a growing warnings of a market bubble. Plus, Silicon Valley's waning political capital, Facebook's anti-Semitic ad scandal, just the latest in a series of setbacks that put the criticism directed at big tech from liberals and conservatives alike under the microscope. And Bloomberg's unprecedented access into China's biggest online commerce company, our wide-ranging exclusive interview with Alibaba's billionaire founder and global disruptor, Jack Ma. But first, to our lead, Bitcoin's magical summer has been coming to a crashing halt. The cryptocurrency has dropped as much as 26% since hitting an all-time high of nearly 5,000 on September 1st. Look at that fall there. The drop is due to moves, might be at least due to some moves by Chinese policymakers restricting the trading of Bitcoin and outlawing the initial coin offerings. The price has been recovering somewhat, but the cryptocurrency market as a whole has taken a hit over the past couple of weeks, knocking about $50 billion off the total market cap of all those cryptocurrencies. Earlier today on Bloomberg, New York Capital Management founder and CEO Jamie Dimon shared his thoughts about the state of the cryptocurrency market.
For Bitcoin, my own view is you can create an infinite number of cryptocurrencies, if you want. If you don't have a central bank, basically behind it, it's probably going to become ubiquitous and all going to go the way of, tulips.
Joining right now to talk about this, Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO of Ripple, and Sunny Singh, BitPay's Chief Commercial Officer. Sunny, let me start with you. This move in China, first of all, the move in Bitcoin this year has backed up everything you've been telling me for the last 3 or 4 years. But then we saw this big sell-off, and you might have expected a sell-off at some point. But it's been dramatic, and it does come when this news from China comes. What do we know about Bitcoin's importance in China?
Yeah, China is definitely important to Bitcoin. China, Korea, Japan, and America are the 4 largest countries with Bitcoin trading. And so China...
In that order?
I think it rotates around. It changes a lot. But definitely very important. 2 of the top 10 largest exchanges are in China. And so the government of China, banned ICOs last week, which started the downfall a little bit.
ICOs are the initial coin offerings. Essentially, someone just says, hey, I got a cryptocurrency and it's worth this much, you need to buy some.
Yep, and it was kind of getting to a frenzy media hysteria in China, so the government just came in and stopped and shut it down, actually, versus regulating it. And then now what the rumor has it is they've given the Bitcoin exchanges till September 15th to shut down too as well. And that's where you saw the selling happen. And this has happened before in China, where the government's forced the exchanges to shut down for a little bit. And what they do is they really start regulating more, add in more restrictions and rules to it, which is actually good for the industry, and they bring them back live again.
Brad, from your perspective, and I know Ripple just deals with Bitcoin a lot, but this notion of cryptocurrency, and what does it mean for countries, places like China, if you can say there are other places like China, maybe not, to use these cryptocurrencies as a way to move money around and solve certain kinds of problems?
Well, I think that really is at the core. I think that when you see real-world use cases, so you can use digital assets, you can use cryptocurrency to solve real-world problems and make payments more efficient, you can make security settlement more efficient, you can make trade finance more efficient. I think to the extent you're solving a real world problem, there's real value in those tokens, in Bitcoin.
If they're being used to buy and sell stuff, as opposed to just sort of speculation.
I very much believe that it's not just about speculation.
Okay.
I think Bitcoin increasingly has become, the use case for Bitcoin has really become the store of value. Gold historically has been a store of value, and that's a $9 trillion asset. Bitcoin is a store of value, the digital store of value, and today it's at a $65 billion asset. There's other digital assets. One of them is one Ripple uses, XRP. We're solving a payments problem. I believe that the more utility you drive, the more demand you're going to drive. And for most of these digital assets, you have fixed supply. If you have fixed supply and increasing demand, it's going to drive price up.
And the scarcity value certainly does it if they're being put to use even more than this. They're just being speculative instruments. And I think that one of the reasons that people talk about Bitcoin stupidly, and they don't really understand what it is, so they do things like just compare it to some other currency or has the word currency in it somewhere, and they look at, but then this price rise in Bitcoin is sort of of the last year really, it looks like things we've seen before. If we go into the Bloomberg terminal, we've created a chart that actually shows this, where you can sort of look at the rise of the bubble, the bubble-licious times in the NASDAQ back in the early 2000s. You see, straight up and to the right, we've seen that before, and since I don't understand what it is, Sonny. I mean, I've known both of you guys since the dot-com bubble, and we've seen this. We've seen a movie like this before. Convince our viewers that this is something different.
Well, and again, I think most people know about Bitcoin because of the price rise, and they buy it and they hold it, or speculation and all that. But what you're really seeing, as Brad mentioned, is the pain point it's solving around the world for payments, for e-commerce, right? So at BitPay, we'll process over $1 billion this year in payments. And that's, regular e-commerce merchants, but it's also businesses, actually, where it's cheaper, quicker than a wire, or a wire might take 3 days and 3% fee. We can move it for 1 day at a 1% fee, let's say.
Well, I should back it up and explain really quickly what you guys do.
Yeah, so we're the largest processor of Bitcoin in the world. We allow companies like Microsoft and Newegg to accept Bitcoin, and we convert it for them and settle in them fiat currency. But we also allow a lot of large global brands to have their suppliers pay them in Bitcoin around the world, from like Nigeria or Latin America, where it might be cheaper and quicker than a wire.
And I guess, Brad, last time we talked on radio, Bloomberg Radio, of course, people can check that out, Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg.com/audio, and I encourage them to do that, or check us out on XM Sirius or in any of the terrestrial stations we have across the country. But you and I talked about this. We talked about the difficulty of closing Bitcoin transactions and the necessity of a fork to somehow change it, but they weren't going to accept it, the Bitcoin community. The Bitcoin community has accepted that, and that helped lead to that rise.
Well, the Bitcoin community has accepted a fork today, and there's already rumors there may be another fork in the future. The point really I was making then, and I continue to make now, is that Bitcoin isn't going to be the panacea to solve all transactions. Payments, which is something that we think about a lot at Ripple, a Bitcoin transaction takes on average 4 hours today to settle. 4 hours is a pretty long time. As Sonny's saying, it's faster than a wire transfer, but it's still not great.
Slower than using my Visa.
It's slower than using your Visa. I was comparing at that time, XRP can transactions at 3 to 4 seconds. So it's a much more fluid system. Just to comment briefly on your comparing the bubble, if you don't mind. I think that there are things that we could point to and say, oh, well, this market has been volatile, a lot of things have changed, but I also think it's very, very different. I remember, because we've both been following this world for a long time, the Newsweek had a cover story about how the internet was overhyped and the internet was going to fail. Literally, the internet is going to fail. Jamie Dimon coming out and saying that Bitcoin is a fraud, to me, it's like the Newsweek cover. This is a Newsweek I don't think really understood. I mean, you look at where the internet is today and how much advancement has happened and how much it's permeated our entire lives. I think there's aspects of what's happening in digital assets, there's aspects of what's happening in blockchain that are going to permeate our lives much more broadly than people can embrace. I think James...
let me add to the Jamie Dimon thing. Bitcoin, on some level, is completely in competition with the business that Jamie Dimon has, of course, recording transactions, being a middleman, being on both sides of a trade, and taking a vig. Cryptocurrency takes a lot of that business away, and so if you were a Jamie Dimon or if you were a Lloyd Blankfein, you might be concerned about cryptocurrencies being accepted in the markets.
Look, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think it's easy for Jamie Dimon to come out and talk about that. If I were a shareholder in JP Morgan, I'd be glad that he's out there doing that because it's in his best interest to protect the establishment. There's an oligopoly that's managing, and he sits on top of that oligopoly in terms of how the payments work today. But most banks actually don't want to see that happen. And you see very innovative banks. Standard Chartered is an early customer of Ripple and leaning in aggressively. Santander. So there's a lot of banks that are not putting their head in the sand.
Right.
And I think they'll be served well. Companies that, Blockbuster put their head in the sand, they could have been Netflix. Right. If you think about it, they had the relationships with customers, they had the relationships with the movie studios, but they put their head in the sand about what the future of the internet was going to enable. And now they're gone, and Netflix obviously is a very valuable company.
Yeah, you see all the banks reaching out to companies like us and Ripple and all that, wanting to partner up. And even though Jamie is saying those things, his internal team is actually working with our companies to do pilots and try to figure out how to leverage this technology.
It does seem like he knows on one level what he's talking about, and maybe that's why he's saying what he's saying. Go figure. Sonny Singh, so good to see you. Sonny
Always
Singh
a pleasure.
From BitPay, Brad Gerlinghaus from Ripple. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
All right, cities are already making a pitch to convince Amazon to build its second headquarters in their city, New York, officially throwing its hat into the ring. The city is highlighting the examples of Google, which has 5,000 employees in Manhattan, as a prime example of how West Coast tech can survive in a Big Apple. Amazon last week solicited proposals for its headquarters, second headquarters, which could cost more than $5 billion, be 50,000 jobs, and could last 15 to 17 years or so. New York has competition from other big cities, including Chicago and Boston, not the least of which Tulsa and Memphis. All right, Amazon set October 19 as a deadline for those proposals. Facebook opening its first artificial intelligence research lab in Canada. The social media giant investing more than $5.7 million. What'll be its fourth AI research lab overall. Facebook said it chose Montreal because of the students and professors surrounding the area and all those universities and a strong startup culture and favorable government policies. The lab will start with 10 researchers and aims to grow at more than 30 researchers in the coming year. Coming up, the political backlash against Silicon Valley heating up. Can tech giants turn the tide? We'll discuss next. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter right now. Check it out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 o'clock in New York, 2 o'clock here on the West Coast. This is Bloomberg. The company's called SoFi, and it has a new executive chairman, Tom Hutton. He's the interim CEO. The move comes after co-founder Mike Cagney stepped down as the top job at the fintech startup amid accusations of sexual harassment or harassment. Either way, he shouldn't do that. He's been said to have engaged at least one inappropriate relationship with an employee, according to people familiar with the matter. The suit's just the latest in a string of high-profile cases of unethical behavior across Silicon Valley. It's a good story, though. Meanwhile, big tech at risk of falling out of political favor. Issue of fake news, the accusations of dodging taxes. Companies like Facebook and Amazon drawing steep criticism from both liberals and conservatives. And today, Facebook says it's no longer allowing advertisers to target people based on how they describe their education or employer, at least for a while, after finding out that they were filing some of these offensive content. After an investigative news piece, really great story on ProPublica, found the advertisers targeting users who expressed interest in finding anti-Semites. Joining me right now, Sarah Fryer from Bloomberg News. First, I'm going to have you paraphrase the ProPublica story there. It's brilliant reporting once again from ProPublica. Tell us what they did.
Absolutely. They did a great job. Basically, it's very easy to target people by basically any way you can imagine them describing themselves. And so in your profile on Facebook, you might say your employer is Bloomberg and your education was, your prior life was in hedge funds or whatever it was.
Wait, that sounds like somebody I know. Go on. Right.
But some people make stuff up and they say their education is Jew-hating and their employer is the Nazi army or whatever. Right. And so what people were able to do is target ads to those self-reported categories, and once their ad was out, the Facebook system approved it automatically, and then they were off to the races.
So ProPublica was able to demonstrate, then one could target information to anti-Semites, for example, in their example. And
we've been able to see this duplicated on Google self-service ad platform and Twitter self-service ad platform. The thing is, these categories are populated automatically by how people describe themselves on Google based on the search terms people use. So it's really a system that Facebook hasn't really touched.
And they said, from what I understand, they said they were going to stop it for now.
Well, until they solve the problem, they're shutting down all targeting by interest and education. So you can't target Ivy League grads who currently have jobs in consulting.
Which somebody might want to do for legitimate reasons. So could this hurt Facebook's revenues?
It could, yeah. This is a kind of way that's very popular for targeting, especially if you want to, in a community of college students, you want to target those students to come to your store. They've got to figure it out because what this whole effort by ProPublica has sort of exposed not too hard. They've exposed the problems with these self-service advertising systems.
Well, but it's interesting. It comes on the heels of the revelation that Facebook said, "Oh yeah, some secret fake Russian groups used us, basically, and punked our consumers by giving them probably fake news."
Well, something that people don't understand about that whole Russian effort is, they could have done it through Facebook and gone through sophisticated sales channels, but probably not. Probably they used a self-service targeting platform, just like ProPublica did in this story, and this shows you just how easy it is if you're anybody to use Facebook to target in very specific ways in specific regions, specific interests. you wouldn't have to have that much extra access to Facebook in order to pull it off. And so.
But then the injury to our society is important here because of
yes.
After the last election, and I don't know if you read this terrific piece in the Atlantic talking about the role of racism in the most recent election, and the notion that people could have been targeted to bring out their worst demons and indeed America's original sin, but intentionally motivated to do something, and Facebook helps them do that, is a sort of damning notion of what the technology of Facebook can do.
Well, this is a moment of reckoning for these tech companies who, previously they might have just said, we're a reflection of what happens in the world, right? There's all sorts of people, on 2 billion people plus, who use Facebook, and some of them are good people, some of them are bad people. They're just being people. Bad things will happen. Now we're getting to the point where we're questioning, okay, well, what is the responsibility of these tech companies to try to think about the edge cases for how their platforms may be used in ways that might hurt democracy, in ways that might manipulate people, in ways that may be untraceable in a campaign situation, right? If you're a TV station, you have to report to the government all the election-related ads. If you're Facebook, you don't. So this is a really trying time for these companies to try to explain themselves as kind of neutral platforms where everything's populated by the community and policed by the community, to now saying, okay, wait, we do have a responsibility here. We need to take some action above and beyond what to try to address this.
If they truly want to. I mean, it does,
Whether or not they want to, they're going to be, this is a moment where they could be regulated.
I'll believe that when I see it.
Yes.
Sarah Friar, thank you very much. Sarah
Thank
Friar
you.
from Bloomberg News. Appreciate your time. All right, coming up, the electric car industry getting a supercharge coming from China. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Well, this week is Electric Future Week at Bloomberg, a deep dive into electric-powered transportation business. A lot of news in the electric car industry this week. Lithium ETFs are feeling the jolt. Third best performing exchange-traded fund is the Lithium Global X ETF. It's up as much as 10% this week. Why? Well, maybe because China said it's going to set a deadline for automakers to end sales of fossil fuel vehicles. That would be most vehicles. Joining right now to talk about the state of the electric car industry, Mark Wakefield, the head of automotive and industrial practice at Alex Partners. Mark, glad to have you. I think that this business is really interesting. The conversation about it tends to be all about Tesla. But talk to me about sort of competitively where we'll be, let's say, in 24 months. Who's going to be out there making electric cars?
Yeah, the talk often is about Tesla. The Chinese news was big, and it's not new news in one sense because China's been pushing all of their automakers to move heavily towards electric cars. So really what we've seen in our electrification index when we looked at not just how many vehicles produced, but how much range is being sold, so a better weighting of electric cars, we saw a number of Chinese vehicles and a number of Chinese OEMs really pushing hard and having about half the amount of launches between here and 2020. Half of the launches will be from Chinese automakers.
Wait, what do you mean? So how many launches are we talking about here? And give us a sense of sort of the global automobile industry and how it compares.
Sure. Well, right now it's very small for the global industry. It's about 1% of the overall industry, so still on a very small percentage. China is probably going to be the one that takes electrification faster sooner. Europe is what we believe to be next, and North America next. And so you'll have different penetration rates in each of those. In China, we see 49 of the next platform launches, and a platform could have multiple vehicles on it. Of the 103 platforms with electric that are being electrified between now and 2020, 49 of those are from Chinese OEMs.
Wow. And what about Europe? What's happening in Europe with Audi, Volkswagen, Porsche, Jaguar, BMW, Mercedes?
Yeah, Europe is number 2, and very big differences between one country and another. France has a lot of longer range electrification, and so is taking it quite seriously. You've got some small, fairly wealthy countries. Norway is a prime example of having almost 11% electric cars at the moment. And so you're seeing Europe take it quite seriously, and particularly in city cars and in smaller range cars outside of France.
It's interesting, too, that I don't have a real sense of where the automakers are in terms of what their plans are to release vehicles. I mean, I know you're talking about sort of what the market's going to be underlying that, but I wonder who the winners and losers might be.
Yeah, people are a bit nervous about going too fast too soon because it's costly at the moment. An electric vehicle doesn't cost the same as an internal combustion engine vehicle at the moment. And depends on the use case. Some delivery trucks, some small cars might get cost neutral in the next decade, in the early part of the next decade. Some other cars in the later part of the next decade. It all really depends on the battery price predominantly coming down. And at the moment, they're much more expensive. And so automakers are a bit nervous about it. Some are taking a longer term bet and going heavily into it, and some are taking more of a wait and see.
Mark Wakefield, thank you very much. Managing partner at Alex Partners, Mark Wakefield. All right, coming up, we're going to be unprecedented exclusive access to top executives of Alibaba, including Jack Ma, who's dancing like a crazy rich fool because he's selling billions of dollars in stock. You'd be dancing too. Look at him go. Really?
Welcome to Hangzhou, China, birthplace and home base of global e-commerce juggernaut Alibaba. I'm Stephen Engel. And what a past 18 years it's been. Transformative not only for Alibaba, of course, but China as well, and also the global internet economy as a whole. And we were here for the 18th birthday bash. Packed in with 40,000 employees into a Hangzhou outdoor stadium. And we spoke exclusively with Group Executive Chairman Jack Ma.
When trade stops, war starts.
Co-founder Zhou Cai.
Free is not a viable model, but patience is.
And Group CEO Daniel Zhang.
Everybody has a big chance to go digital, but the people need to change.
Three leaders driving Alibaba, the global disruptor. It was a humble beginning for Jack Ma and Zhou Cai as they co-founded Alibaba in 1999. Few Chinese were even connected to the World Wide Web, but enthusiasm for .coms bubbled abroad, and Alibaba wanted in. When the tech bubble burst, though, many plans were put on hold. When an Alibaba employee was suspected of contracting SARS in 2003, senior executives were quarantined, and that gave birth to perhaps their best idea to date, e-shopping platform Taobao, which drove then market leader eBay out of China and eventually led to the phenomenal success of the Singles Day shopping extravaganza and a world-beating New York IPO in 2014 and the launch of many new businesses, including Ant Financial. Much like Bloomberg's setup for the interviews, the rise of Alibaba has been no small feat.
How are you? Sorry, good to see you again, Jack.
And its next steps may be even more demanding.
I think the challenge is getting bigger, much bigger than the early days. The early days, to me, it's like the fun part. And we have something, if you want to, when we competed with eBay, when we see the SARS, there are a lot of things we can learn from the other guys, from other companies. But today, the things we're doing, there's nothing we can learn from. Nobody would. So you have to think, because everything, we are the pioneer, we're the leader of this industry. So you have to drive, what the things should drive you, it's the value, it's the mission. It's not something that there's a textbook you can read.
I don't think anybody could have imagined the kind of scale we've reached today, but I think we're very lucky to have participated in the confluence of China's economic growth and also the rise of technology.
Actually, this November 11, I think is the best reflection of the landscape change, internet landscape change in China and the consumer lifestyle change in China. 500 million customers in China, and today even more, and more overseas customers now join this event.
When I started Alibaba in 1999, The GDP per capita of China was $870. Today is over 8,000. So it's a 10x increase. We've been very fortunate to be in this environment and rode that wave.
We know where we're going. We want to be the fifth largest economy, enable more small business, young people, and enable globalization. So that's our direction. But on the way there, and we got a more and more problem.
Today, if you look at the volume of the package generated on our platform is about 55 million a day. And we strongly believe that this will go to 1 billion, actually, some years later.
A day?
A day.
I'm telling my team, it's just like when you are climbing the mountains. You know, when you are only 1,000 meters high, you enjoy it. It's fun. Below 100 meters, you think everything's fine. But when you grow across 4,000 meters, you don't have enough air. You don't have a lot of people working together with you. You even do not know who to share with your thoughts and worries. And now we are probably like 5,000 to 6,000 meters high. So we get lonely without a strong mind and a mission. That's difficult, and ideas that it's difficult for you to continue to work.
Have you faced resistance within China for what you're doing? I recently interviewed Zhong Tingho, Wahaha. We all know about his comments about the internet economy destroying manufacturing and a drive to zero, driving things down. Do you think there's an old guard in China that doesn't quite understand the new economy, that they'll have to adapt?
Of course, we're having this kind of resistance in the past 18 years almost every day. We see people like Mr. Zhong a lot. But, you know, this is the evolution, the revolution of the technology. People like these old tycoons in the old economy, in their early days, they destroyed a lot of lower level companies. We are helping manufacturing, right? We sold more than $500 billion products last year, and 70% of them were helping selling the manufacturing. Because we don't produce. Without us, these 70% of the $500 billion manufactured products will never be able to reach the consumers.
Will you facilitate reform at the state-owned enterprises from the outside? Because the vested interests want to keep the status quo.
Yeah, we're pushing that. And this is why a lot of banks don't like us in China. We're not necessarily interested in buying the banks to change it. But because of us chasing them around, they reform. The China banks really react very quickly in the past 3-5 years. These banks change their services so fast. They input so much resources on the technology and on serving the people better. You don't have to buy a bank and change one bank, but you push and chase them around, and when a tiger is following you, you can run much faster than you thought.
Now, you're Asia's richest man, but are you still, in your mind, an entrepreneur?
No, I never think I'm the richest man. I even got a feeling because I don't spend money. I don't have time to spend money. People say, Jack, you can spend money better than government, better than the other guys. Mm-hmm. So you own assets, how you can spend better, including my own private assets. This is how much money you can spend in your life.
Coming up, Alibaba broadens its scope, investing heavily in Southeast Asia, as well as into brick and mortar under its new retail concoction. And Jack Ma sizes up one of his chief competitors, Tencent's Pony Ma.
I think that Pony did not have any experience of globalization, right? Not like us.
Having conquered e-commerce, Alibaba is broadening its user ecosystem by investing heavily in areas like cloud computing, logistics, digital entertainment, and even brick-and-mortar retailing by marrying the online and offline worlds through its Hema supermarkets, as well as the cashless and cashierless convenience stores. It begs the question, is Alibaba moving away from its long-standing asset-light model?
When you're young, tiny, light model is good. When you are strong, big, think about you need heavy things. For today's Alibaba size, you should not leave the heavy model to the others. If something, you have to do it because the infrastructure building up, you have to invest.
We want to change the consumer experience because you now have this growing middle class in China whose expectations and demands are being elevated.
Online, offline, we cannot separate. They need to do the digital transformation. All the Chinese brick-and-mortar retail formats will be upgraded or even redefined. I think Hema is just one, actually is our baby. We want to incubate successful model. We try to empower our partner, our offline partner, to upgrading their business. But I think the most important thing is to embrace the change.
What we can do is we could serve an in-store purchase. You can also walk in and eat right there, so it's sort of like a food hall. But then if you don't feel like going into the streets, to going to the store, you can stay at home and order everything on your mobile phone and it gets delivered to you in 30 minutes. Everything that's done, in-store purchase, eat-in, or online purchase, served from the same store location.
Obviously, Alibaba also investing heavily into Southeast Asia, into India as well. Can this model, this new retail model as well, be implemented, and will you implement that as you expand in Southeast Asia?
I would say yes. I think new retail is not only applicable to China, it's applicable to all the markets globally.
I think Southeast Asia over the next 5 or even 10 years will be a game of penetration, with e-commerce taking more share of overall retail. Today, I think as a whole market, Southeast Asia is probably less than 3% e-commerce penetration. Right. Specifically to Indonesia, this year they'll have less than $15 billion of GMV this year for the whole country. So there's a lot of growth opportunities.
Well, always think about the future. So what the Alibaba to our size today, you have to think about what you can do in 10 years later. What are the key things? There is a competition. Alipay has been lonely running around for 10 years, no competitor, which is good for Alipay, but it's not good for the mission we want to do. When Tencent Pay came in, at the beginning, I think Alipay said, wow, we have a competitor. But I think when you're asking people now today, they're getting more fun because they know there's somebody we can work in together, we can influence more people, we can make the market bigger. And this is the fun part. I think Tencent Pay are learning a lot from us. We are also learning a lot from them. So those two companies, if we can work in together, getting the whole society cashless pay, the whole society based on the trust and credit, that will make the market much bigger.
Now, what is going to be the criteria for you, and I guess as you compete against Tencent and the likes, for your rush into Southeast Asia? That's the new horizon. You've bought stakes in Lazada, which also has the stake in Redmart in Singapore, Tokopedia, you're a lead investor there in Indonesia. You've gone into India with Paytm. I hear you're looking at Big Basket. So there seems to be a land grab in Southeast Asia. Are you going to really get the penetration and the growth there through, say, the payments infrastructure and Alipay, or is it to get the e-commerce platforms because the penetration of e-commerce is so low in Southeast Asia?
I think what we are doing is not about going there doing e-commerce. I've been saying again and again internally. The thing is, Alibaba should going outside. It's not a globalized Alibaba. We are globalized e-commerce infrastructure. So we are not particularly interested in one market, so like go to Malaysia or Indonesia and getting some market share there and be the largest e-commerce company there. No, we're not interested in that. They need a payment system. They need a logistics system. They need the platform system so they can sell things globally. Mm-hmm. We are interested in the cross-border trading and e-commerce. I don't think Tencent can do that because we've been doing that for 15 years. They'll probably be good on the payment, especially good if you're WeChat. The Chinese people use a lot. But when you go to Indian people don't use the WeChat. They probably cannot do a lot. I think Pony did not have any experience of globalization, right? Not like us.
Are you afraid at all, though, that all this data that you're collecting by creating this ecosystem, and because you do like partnerships, you have partnerships with Tainao and partnerships with Best Logistics, but you're all collecting data. Do you run the risk, though, of down the road having a dispute over ownership of that data, much like there has been in the past?
Yeah.
Because you want to be a data company. That's your biggest asset, right?
I think data in the future, there are two issues for data, security and privacy. For these two issues, there's always a problem ahead. So you have to be very, very, very careful about security of the data and privacy of the data. Based on that, but you have to go forward. Not like in Europe, they worry a lot. When you worry, you don't know what to do. You have to go when you have a problem, solve the problem. Go ahead, solve the problem.
How valuable, though, is that data? It must be extremely valuable.
Its data is so new to everybody. And it takes time to educate. If the data does not flow, meaningless. So I think today it's good. Everybody, every government start to worry about data, pay attention to data. But how to operate the data in a proper way that can improve the society, improve people's life, that is something the next 5, 10 years is going to be critical. At the beginning, nobody cared about data. Later, everybody take together. Just like last century, at the beginning, nobody take care of like the oils. And now later, everybody love the oil. Now, for the oil, they would love to have the wars.
Up next, Alibaba's New York listed shares are on a tear, but does Jack Ma think we're heading for another popping of a tech bubble?
If you're not that greedy, if you're not that stupid and crazy, it's easy to survive today and yesterday.
Alibaba was founded at the turn of the century amid a global rush into dot-coms. Alibaba even opened an office in California and ready to ride the wave. Jack Ma, though, saw the frothiness and poor business models of others and correctly predicted the dot-com collapse in 2000.
Are we facing a similar kind of tech bubble right now with these billion-dollar unicorns and an inflated tech scene? Are there any similarities?
No.
None.
No, not that much. I think the challenge at that time, a lot of people did not understand how powerful internet is, how to do internet the way, and whether internet can sustain. So people just jump in, start to do it. And I find a lot of people have crazy ideas, but does not know how to operate. Today, everybody knows internet is going to be powerful, it's going to change the human history.
I look at it from a very long-term perspective. And if you take a step back and look at Alibaba, we went public in 2014. Our stock price at the IPO was $68 a share. Today, it's at the current level, it's about 2.5 times increase. But look at our revenues. During the same 3-year period, our revenues have tripled. So our stock price haven't even caught up with our revenue growth yet. Same thing, Facebook. When they went public, they had, I think, about 1 billion users. Now they have 2 billion users. So if you look at the long-term perspective, these large-scale internet companies continues to grow, and there's no reason why they would stop growing.
I think the infrastructure of the internet, the infrastructure of the technology is much better than 10, 15 years ago. So if you do the way in a proper, if you're not that greedy, if you're not that stupid and crazy, it's easy to survive today and yesterday.
Are you concerned at all that the capital controls that are in place now, or the heightened capital controls, and also the deleverage campaign and the crackdown on irrational purchases, M&A overseas, in entertainment, in sports, in non-core businesses, is this going to be a deterrent for outbound investment?
Not really. I I think it depends on how you do it. For Alibaba, it's our strategy. We never think that we should dump money in the outside world. In the older days, when you go to some country, the most important is to dump the money inside. But we think we should share the technology. You know, we're lucky, we're a global company, we've got a lot of capitals outside.
There's a little bit of anti-trade sentiment, but it's understandable when you see a fairly large trade deficit. But to us, we look at it, it doesn't really affect us because the trade flow that we're talking about is selling American products into China. So we are steadfast, focused on that strategy. And you know, if in the other direction, I think some of the retailers, both traditional and online in the United States, will suffer first if there's a trade war based on trade tariffs.
We never change our U.S. strategy. We want to help U.S. small, medium-sized companies, young people to sell to China.
Sell to China.
And sell to Asia. This is what we think. We think we don't want to go to USA being the local e-commerce company, which I think Amazon, eBay, so many nice, interesting e-commerce companies already all over USA.
You don't want to take on Amazon doing what they're doing.
No, no.
How about in entertainment, in Hollywood? I know you had a partnership a year and a half or so ago with Amblin and
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg. You've been patient there. You've been the tortoise there, not the hare. So what's your strategy with partnership with Hollywood through probably the best name in Hollywood, Amblin and Steven Spielberg?
Yeah, I think first important is that our entertainment is focused on our double H strategy. Because we ask ourselves now, in the next 10 years, we know we're going to be very profitable, we'll be very good at doing all e-commerce and logistics, financing, data. But 10 years later, what is a new business that Alibaba should be focused on? So we say happy and healthy. These are two double H is our direction. No matter how rich you want to be healthy, you want to be happier. So, and entertainment should be part of the business.
We don't view digital entertainment as a separate business. We view like the content acquisition cost as an investment to acquire and retain customers on our Alibaba ecosystem.
So it's okay to continue to incur losses as long as it builds the customer base and builds the ecosystem.
Yes.
I think there are a lot of things China entertainment can learn from the Hollywood. We should partner with them. Should not think about it is good, let's buy it. No. This is a strategy for 10 years, Ali Entertainment. Only 3 years, don't worry about it. A lot of people criticize us. Hey, we've been criticized for 18 years, never stop. So you know where you're going.
Where do you see Alibaba and what kind of company do you see Alibaba will be in the next 18 years from now?
I would say Alibaba today is not a simple company. Alibaba is an economy and it is an ecosystem to empower the business to go digital and to do the digital transformation. Of course, I think we want to be bigger, but I think the most important thing is quality.
I think the business mix will change, will always change because we will follow what our customers want. But the important thing is Alibaba 5, 10, 20 years from now will still be the same company when it comes to our mission to make it easy to do business anywhere.
And I think 18 years is enough for us to improve globalization instead of killing globalization. And anti-trade, I believe when trade stops, war starts. All right, so people start to trade. We can only fight orally, but never fight with fist. So I think this is the mission. This is the responsibility for Alibaba to improve globalization.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.